Hello, and welcome to the Libertarian Show. My name is Aaron. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of talk on the internet about single-payer healthcare. I'm always actually seeing a lot of talk on the internet about single-payer healthcare, but lately there's been a lot of people on the left lamenting the fact that Joe Biden is not interested in putting single-payer forward, and that most of the Democratic Party is not interested in putting single-payer forward in the United States, despite them having a majority in, the House and the Senate, and having a Democratic president. But really, man, single-payer is politically and economically impossible in the United States. It won't fly. It wouldn't sustain. It wouldn't hold. There's a lot of reasons why. I want to get into one specific little anecdotal story, I guess, but it's actually a really indicative story about an attempt at single payer that seemed to have everything going for it in the U.S. and it failed despite having all the advantages and all of the momentum behind it, and you'll see what I mean. But really, if single payer couldn't happen in this instance, then it can't happen anywhere. Now, if you're a young adult, if you're in your 20s or maybe you're in your teens, then you might not remember this story. You may have been too young to have watched this debacle unfold. But I want to take you back in time 10 years ago to the state of Vermont. You probably have heard of Vermont. In case you haven't, here is a map of the eastern United States, and that little red guy at the top right, that red state, that is the state of Vermont. It's not a particularly large state in America, but it's a pretty famous state in America. One of its recent claims to fame is being the state that is represented by Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a self-declared socialist, and he is, of course, a senator serving in the United States government. He's been serving in the federal government for some time now. Vermont is a very left-leaning state. There's a lot of pro-government and pro-economic planning sentiment in Vermont, and as a consequence of that, single payer is very popular in Vermont among the voters, among the working class, and of course among the political class. So, way back in 2011, this is a decade ago, a guy named Peter Shumlin, that ran a campaign for the governorship of Vermont. Of course, he was in the Democratic Party. He's very left-leaning, but here's the important part. Peter ran a campaign that centered around a promise to enact single-payer health care throughout the entire state of Vermont, covering everybody. And he ran on that issue as his governorship campaign. Okay, it was the central issue. It was what he talked about. If elected, I will enact single payer in the state of Vermont. And he won. He won the vote. He became governor in 2011. And then a few issues and natural disasters and shit happened that kind of distracted him for a little bit. But eventually, in 2014, he started crunching numbers to implement the single-payer program that he had promised the voters in the state of Vermont. So when the dust settled, the numbers didn't look good, to put it mildly. Single payer in Vermont was projected to cost about $2.5 billion the first year. Now, to put that in context, the entire annual budget for the state government of Vermont was only $2.7 billion, which means that they would have had to nearly double the budget. Actually, when it comes to government with typical cost overruns and, the increases in expenditures that you see happen in just about every government attempt to do anything, California high-speed rail, the reality is that it would have cost a lot more than $2.5 billion. That was, more of a rosy estimate. So it would have cost more than double the entire government budget to implement. Okay, what I mean is it would have gone further than doubling the government budget. So the only way to fund this white elephant, this albatross, would have been through a massive, massive tax hike. All right, they were looking at, and I don't mean just taxing people like the rich. I mean taxing everybody. Okay, they would have had to pump up the payroll tax on businesses, including small businesses, by 11.5%. And then on top of that, they would have had to increase individual income taxes on everyone in the state by 9%. All right. To give those taxes more context, that would have required a 160% tax increase. 160%. Let me get back to the main window here. So it was basically a massive tax hike, a massive increase in the size of government. It would have straight up wrecked, okay, Vermont's economy. It would have wrecked it. And Peter Shumlin, he realized that. He's not an idiot, okay? He's an ideologue, but he's not an idiot. So what did he do? He took a long, sober look at those numbers, and then he turned around and walked away from single payer. He did a 180, and he surprised the media. The media was expecting him to unveil a plan of how he's going to pay for the whole shit, and instead, the media assembles and he gets in front of them and he says, "I'm not going to do single payer." And this is the guy that ran on single payer as the central issue of his campaign. Okay, he abandoned single payer. He abandoned his central campaign issue. He broke his promise. I presume that after doing that, he poured himself a double scotch and cried really hard. Vermont was probably the state out of all 50 states in America. It was the state with the best chance of passing single payer. Had a governor that ran on single payer, had a dedicated voter base that voted him in for single payer, a left-leaning voter base that reelected Bernie Sanders over and over again. There was a lot of sympathy for single payer in Vermont. They still couldn't do it. The wind was in their sails. The wind was at their backs. They had the momentum. It still couldn't happen. All right. Now, I'm not confident that any other state in the USA could do single payer, could achieve single payer. If Vermont couldn't do it, California can't do it. Washington State can't do it. Nobody can do it. Okay. New York can't do it. Ain't going to happen. All right. The federal government, okay, the federal government certainly can't do it, okay, because all of those other examples I just provided have less favorable conditions than Vermont does in terms of political, political momentum, in terms of the wind at their backs and voters support and so on. The U.S. healthcare system is already so costly that to do a single payer transition and maintain those high levels of spending would cause an economic and government budgetary apocalypse. So that can't happen. The other way to do single payer would be to transition to single payer and lower the spending to more closely match like Canada or UK spending. But that would cause a severe decrease in the quality of care, the accessibility of care, the quantity of care available to people. And it would cause a huge political and voter backlash. Consumers would be incredibly unsatisfied because the quality of their care would be reduced. They would be getting less. It would feel like the healthcare system got worse, and it would get worse. And that would, what would happen then? Then the very next election, the voters would vote in whichever candidate promised to scrap the single payer system entirely. So single payer is not implementable in the USA, not in any state. And even if it did get implemented, it would not be sustainable. Okay. Now, if you're curious, a lot of people watching this might go, "Hey, that doesn't make any sense. Canada and UK, they got great healthcare." No, they don't. The US healthcare system is better. It's the best. It beats Canada's and the UK's, and it beats every other single payer system. If you're curious about my claim that the USA already has better quality and better access to healthcare than Canada or the UK or similar single payer systems, I do have another video where I go into great detail about this. I support my assertion. I give you a lot of examples and charts. It's a video on my channel called Healthcare, Public versus Private. I'm going to link to it in the description below. Anyway, single payer healthcare is basically impossible in the USA. It's a pipe dream, all right? It's impossible in any of the 50 states. It's impossible at the federal level. And the slow incremental creep of government getting more involved in the healthcare industry every year, which we do see happening in the USA, that's just making things worse. It's not making anything better. The US healthcare system, while being too expensive and having so many faults, is still the best healthcare system in the world at detecting and treating the most deadly and common diseases known to man. And it is, ironically, more accessible than any single payer system currently in existence. Again, I back all this up in my other video that you can see linked below. To improve healthcare in the US or in any other country, but especially in the US, what you should do is you should reduce government spending, reduce government involvement, reduce or eliminate government coverage for patients. Maybe like, the poor patients or, the infirm that don't have any support system, maybe you could limit it to those people. But overall, you want to reduce government involvement and government coverage of patients. You got to reduce the regulations, reduce the red tape, eliminate the monopolies granted to the drug companies, granted to the hospital networks, granted to the doctors. You got to foster a competitive marketplace and increase supply, okay, by cutting the red tape. That's how you increase the supply. And you got to make pricing, this is a big one, you got to make pricing more transparent for consumers. That's how you get the best bang for your buck. That's how you get the most access. That's how you get the lowest wait times. And that's how you get the best healthcare outcomes. Thanks for watching. Peace out.